At a somber funeral in the small village of Brookhaven, everyone stood silently, offering their condolences. Only an unexpected neigh from Comet, a loyal horse, broke the stillness. The piercing sound drew all eyes to the coffin, where a priest stood, his face momentarily tense. But why would a horse react so strangely in such a solemn setting? As a young man named Keanu began to question the scene, the priest's unease became increasingly apparent. Within minutes, long-buried secrets started to surface, pulling the entire village into an unexpected story. Hit the like button on the video and get ready to uncover the truth behind this mysterious neigh. On a gloomy morning in the small town of Brookhaven, the cold wind whistled through the trees, creating a mournful melody. The funeral of Fiona, a beloved woman in the community, had drawn a small group of friends and neighbors. A heavy silence blanketed the scene, broken only by the rustling leaves and the occasional sigh from the mourners. Amidst this setting, Comet, Fiona's longtime companion, stood quietly beside her coffin. But the quiet didn't last long. Comet suddenly neighed loudly, shattering the funeral's somber atmosphere. Its sharp cry tore through the misty air of the graveyard. The horse's strong hooves stamped against the ground, carving into the cold earth with intensity. Its eyes flashed with tension, fixed firmly on the coffin. The horse's agitation immediately caught everyone's attention. Whispers began to spread through the crowd as each person tried to make sense of its strange behavior. A middle-aged woman nearby clutched her scarf with trembling hands, murmuring, "Perhaps it senses something. Animals are often very sensitive." A child clung to his mother's hand, his wide eyes filled with confusion. The boy whispered to his mother, wondering if Comet could see Fiona's ghost. The question heightened the anxious atmosphere in the graveyard. Father Edward, the town's priest, known for his calm demeanor, was visibly unsettled by Comet's unusual behavior. Stepping closer to the horse, he tried to soothe it with a gentle voice. "Calm down, Comet. Everything is fine." But his words had no effect. Comet neighed even louder, its eyes seemingly glowing with panic, its hooves continuing to stomp forcefully. Keanu, a newcomer to the town who had arrived only weeks before, stood apart from the crowd. He didn't know Fiona well, but her brief encounters had left a strong impression on him. Comet's actions captivated Keanu, and he couldn't look away. Observing carefully, he noticed that the horse's gaze was not simply frantic, it was deliberate. "Something's wrong," Keanu whispered, his eyes locked on both the horse and the coffin. Keanu decided to approach Comet. His steps were light but purposeful. As he neared, Comet suddenly turned its head toward him, letting out a loud neigh as if calling him closer. Keanu stopped just a few steps away, his gaze steady yet kind. Kneeling down, he gently ran his hand along Comet's neck, feeling its strong breath against his fingers. "What are you trying to tell us, my friend?" Keanu murmured, his voice low and comforting. The horse seemed to understand Keanu's words. It paused its stomping briefly, its deep eyes staring intently toward the old chapel at the far end of the graveyard. A sharp snort from its nostrils sounded like a warning. Keanu turned to follow Comet's gaze, his heart pounding harder. The chapel, long abandoned, had stained glass windows dulled with dust and time. But today it seemed eerily alive, as if hiding a dark secret. "Comet is trying to tell us something," Keanu said aloud, his voice carrying enough conviction to capture everyone's attention. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people began recalling old tales about animals sensing the supernatural. Curiosity spread, and all eyes were now on Keanu as he stood, his hand resting on Comet's mane. "All right, my friend, lead the way," Keanu said firmly. Comet flicked its mane and began to move, its steps deliberate and steady, as though guiding an entire procession toward the chapel. Keanu followed closely behind, his face resolute. One by one, the other mourners trailed behind, unwilling to miss the unfolding mystery. The air around the graveyard grew heavier. Each of Comet's steps seemed to deepen the sense of foreboding. Some whispered about the town's long-forgotten tales of supernatural events. These stories, buried by time, now resurfaced as plausible explanations for Comet's actions. As the group approached the chapel, an eerie chill enveloped them. The wind picked up, scattering dry leaves and swirling dust. Comet halted in front of the chapel door, letting out another loud neigh. Keanu placed his hand on the rough wooden door, feeling the grit of years gone by. He turned to the crowd behind him, his gaze landing on Father Edward, who now appeared more anxious than ever. "We need to know what's happening here," Keanu declared, his voice firm and persuasive. A few people nodded in agreement, recognizing that Comet's behavior couldn't be ignored. The heavy breathing of Comet echoed like a warning, shattering the solemn silence within the hallowed space of the church. The horse's luminous eyes were fixed intently on the closed door, as if perceiving something beyond human comprehension. Beside him, Keanu stood tall, his hand tightening slightly on the reins, determination evident on his face. As he prepared to open the door, a deep voice sounded from behind. "Please, everyone, remain calm." Father Edward, the elderly priest, emerged slowly from the crowd. His usually dignified demeanor was now marred by beads of sweat on his forehead and a worried glint in his eyes. "We are here to honor the memory of an important member of our community," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Let us not disrupt this sacred moment." His words were meant to ease the tension, yet his sharp, wary gaze landed squarely on Keanu and Comet. That look did not escape Keanu's sharp perception. Meeting the priest's eyes, Keanu responded firmly, "This horse knows something, and I believe we should not ignore that." Keanu's statement caused a ripple of murmurs among the crowd, the whispers spreading like waves. Father Edward froze in place, his expression momentarily shifting. His tone turned sharper as he snapped, "What you're doing is disrespectful. Leave the horse alone and stop causing a disturbance." But Keanu held his ground. He stepped forward, his gaze locking with the priest's, as though attempting to pierce his soul. Comet, standing close by, tapped a hoof against the tiled floor. The horse's ears twitched continuously, as if detecting invisible signals. Its gaze never wavered from the closed door, a fixation that only deepened the tension in the air. Questions flooded Keanu's mind. Why was Comet reacting this way? Was there something hidden behind the door, or was it just a coincidence? But one thing he knew for certain: Comet's instincts had never been wrong. He placed a reassuring hand on the horse's mane, both to calm it and to bolster his own confidence. From a short distance away, Father Edward suddenly raised his voice, the sound resonating throughout the small church. "Please, everyone, let us keep Fiona's memory pure. Let us return to the true purpose of our gathering, to pray for her soul and eternal peace." Despite his sincere tone, the tremor in his voice and the sweat trickling down his temple betrayed his unease. The atmosphere in the church grew heavier than ever. All eyes turned to Keanu, awaiting his next move. After a moment of silence, Keanu spoke, his voice clear and unwavering. "Father Edward, how exactly did Fiona pass away?" Keanu's unexpected question was like a lightning bolt, splitting through the already tense air. The crowd stirred, whispers quickly spreading. The priest seemed momentarily flustered but regained his composure to answer, "She passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was the one who found her in bed." Yet Keanu's gaze remained fixed on Father Edward, suspicion etched in his eyes. He took a step closer, his voice growing firmer. "Why was Fiona alone? And why were you the first to find her?" Keanu's probing questions caused an uproar among the crowd. Villagers exchanged bewildered glances, some stepping back as if wanting no part in the matter. Nearby, children looked up in confusion, unable to understand why the once solemn atmosphere had turned so charged. Father Edward's face flushed red. He suddenly stomped his foot, the sound reverberating through the church. "This is absurd," he shouted, his voice trembling. "You are ruining this sacred moment. Leave, both you and that horse." Keanu did not respond immediately. He stared directly at the priest, his eyes filled with resolve, before leaning down to whisper into the horse's ear, "We have work to do." With a firm tug on the reins, he led Comet out of the church, leaving behind a flurry of murmurs. Outside, the sky was overcast, and a cold wind swept through, carrying the chill of winter. Dry tree branches swayed, creating a sound like ancient whispers. Keanu stopped, his eyes fixed on the cemetery at the end of the path. Beside him, Comet neighed softly as if in agreement. "Let's go, my friend," Keanu murmured. "There's a mystery to solve." Two figures, one man and one horse, made their way toward the graveyard. Weathered tombstones, covered in moss, stood silently beneath the gloomy sky. A cold breeze blew through, carrying the scent of damp earth and echoes of the past. Comet halted, its ears pricking up, its gaze fixed on an unseen point ahead. Keanu stepped forward slowly, his hand brushing against the horse's mane, seeking to calm both the animal and himself. Keanu decided that the first thing to do was to learn more about Fiona. She had always been a mysterious woman, and he knew the answers might lie somewhere in her life. He arrived at her house, a small stone cottage on the edge of the forest, isolated from the hustle and bustle of the town. The house had a timeless beauty, but now it appeared abandoned. The garden outside was overrun with weeds, wildflowers growing rampant and obscuring the path leading to the front door. The scene seemed to symbolize secrets buried by time, waiting to be unearthed. As Keanu approached, he noticed that the front door was ajar. A soft breeze nudged it, making it creak as if issuing a foreboding invitation. A small jar hung suspended by the window frame, clinking gently with each gust of wind. Looking at it, Keanu thought it might be a signal or some kind of marker left by Fiona. He had the sense that someone had recently left in a hurry, leaving behind a chaos they couldn't bear to face. Crossing the threshold, Keanu felt a chill run down his spine. The interior of the house was covered in dust, but it was evident that someone had searched through it recently. Items on the shelves were in disarray, a few drawers had been pulled out, and a chair lay tipped over in the corner. Comet, his loyal horse, stood just outside, snorting with unease. The sound of its hooves lightly tapping the ground hinted that it, too, sensed the tension in the air. Keanu carefully searched every corner of the house. He opened drawers and inspected the bookshelves. His gaze settled on an old wooden desk where a small wooden box sat quietly. The box looked aged but was well cared for, as if it held something important. When he opened it, Keanu found letters and photographs yellowed with age. Each letter seemed to reveal a fragment of Fiona's enigmatic life. As he skimmed the letters, Keanu quickly realized that Fiona had been hiding many things. The words described secret meetings between her and strangers from outside the town. One letter sent a chill through him. Fiona mentioned Father Edward, the town's priest, and hinted that she had uncovered something deeply troubling about him. Her words were written in fear but also with determination. Sensing the rising tension, Comet tilted its head and took a step forward. Keanu gently stroked its mane, reassuring them both. Continuing his search, he found a small key hidden behind a painting on the wall. The key was shiny, as if it had been recently used. What could this unlock? Keanu wondered, turning the key over in his hands. Comet, as if responding, snorted and shook its head. Near where he found the key was a photograph. In it, Fiona stood next to Father Edward, with the town church in the background. But what caught Keanu's attention was the small metal box at their feet. It was identical to the box Fiona had described in her letter. "We're on the right track," Keanu whispered, his eyes filled with resolve. He clenched the key tightly, feeling a surge of determination. Comet stood by his side, its bright eyes urging him onward. Determined not to stop, Keanu went to the town's old library in search of more clues. The small library, nestled among surrounding houses, was nearly forgotten. Its shelves were covered in dust, and the air was thick with the smell of dampness. Keanu flipped through books and documents until he found an old town photo album. One photograph made him pause. Fiona stood next to Father Edward, but her eyes betrayed a deep worry, a stark contrast to the cheerful expressions of those around her. In the corner of the photograph, a small metal box appeared, just like the one in Fiona's letter. Keanu quickly realized this box was more than an ordinary object. It was the key to the secret Fiona had been trying to expose. More determined than ever, he returned to Fiona's house. This time, his perseverance paid off when he found a small journal cleverly hidden behind a curtain. The journal, filled with Fiona's hastily scribbled handwriting, revealed a story far more terrifying than Keanu had imagined. In it, Fiona described a dangerous conspiracy and the deep corruption within the church. The pages accused Father Edward of exploiting the trust of the congregation to embezzle donation money for sinister purposes. Keanu's heartbeat quickened as he read the part where Fiona described discovering the metal box and its contents. Alongside the journal was an envelope containing photographs of Father Edward standing beside an ancient statue in the church. In his hands was the familiar metal box. His posture suggested he was concealing something. A shiver ran down Keanu's spine. He turned to Comet, who stood by his side like a faithful companion. Fiona uncovered the truth, and it put her in danger. "Now it's up to us to finish what she started," he murmured. Keanu and Comet's journey continued, the key in his hand and determination in his heart. They knew that exposing Father Edward's secret would not only reveal what had happened to Fiona, but also tear down the veil of darkness shrouding the entire town. Keanu knew that the metal box was the final piece needed to uncover the truth. He and Comet, his loyal horse with a sleek black coat, galloped like the wind through the narrow streets of Ridgewood. The sound of hooves echoed on the cobblestones, urging them onward. Determination filled Keanu's heart as he felt the weight of time and the danger looming behind him. The church came into view, its aged dome bathed in dim moonlight. Keanu reined in Comet and paused, scanning his surroundings to ensure he wasn't being followed. The church door was slightly ajar, and faint light filtered through the cracks, casting eerie shadows on the moss-covered walls. Comet stood by his side, exhaling deeply as if trying to reassure his master. Keanu stepped through the door, silence enveloping him, broken only by the echo of his footsteps in the vast space. The ancient wooden pews stood motionless, evoking a sense of time frozen. He approached a statue, the one mentioned in the old photograph he had discovered. It depicted a saint gazing downward, as though watching his every move. Keanu's hand trembled as he touched the statue's base. A chill spread from the metal to his fingertips. Pulling aside a worn cloth that concealed its secret, he revealed a metal box. Though not large, the thick layer of dust spoke of its long-forgotten state. When he opened the lid, neatly bundled cash was inside, mysterious and unsettling. Small notes attached to each bundle detailed their origin, donations from the townsfolk. Yet beneath the money lay a small key and a map. A red circle marked a location with the words "Church Archives." Realizing the significance of the discovery, Keanu clenched the key tightly in his hand. He glanced at Comet, drawing strength from the horse's steadfast gaze. Using the map, he followed its instructions to a hidden door behind the altar. The chill in the air sent shivers down his spine. With all his courage, Keanu inserted the key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. With a flashlight in hand, Keanu and Comet descended the stairs. The space below was cramped and damp, heavy with the scent of mildew. Water droplets echoed through the air. The flashlight's beams scanned the old stone walls, exposing cracks and patches of moss. The corridor led to a small room dimly lit by a faint glow. A metallic, clanging sound broke the silence, stopping Keanu in his tracks. "Fiona!" Keanu called softly, hoping for a response. Only his voice echoed back, cold and hollow. At the end of the hallway, he saw her. The woman he had been searching for, chained to a chair. Her hair hung limply and her face was pale, but her eyes sparkled faintly with hope at the sight of him. "Keanu," she whispered, weak yet resolute. Keanu rushed to free her, but a sudden heavy noise from behind made him turn. Standing there was Father Edward, gripping a thick wooden plank, his eyes blazing with rage. "You should not have come here," he growled with venom. Before Keanu could react, Father Edward charged at him with terrifying strength. The plank narrowly missed Keanu's shoulder, sending him staggering backward, pain shooting through his body. He fell to the cold ground, looking up to see the priest readying another blow. But at that moment, Comet let out a piercing neigh, shattering the silence. The horse charged with incredible speed, using its powerful body to knock Father Edward down. The plank fell from his hands, rolling to the corner of the room. The priest struggled, attempting to rise, but Comet pressed him down, its eyes blazing with vigilance. Seizing the opportunity, Keanu sprang to his feet and ran toward the priest. Father Edward resisted fiercely, rolling away from Comet's reach. But the horse was relentless. It reared up, striking the ground with its hooves as a stern warning. The struggle threw the room into chaos. The commotion drew the attention of the villagers, who gathered at the church. The scene before them was beyond belief. Father Edward, long revered, now wrestling on the ground, opposed by Keanu and his loyal horse. Keanu shouted, "You all need to know the truth!" His voice echoed, silencing the murmurs. He quickly explained his findings: the stolen money, Fiona's kidnapping, and the dark secrets hidden within the church. The villagers listened in stunned silence, their faces filled with shock. Father Edward attempted to flee once more, but Comet blocked his path. A few men from the crowd stepped forward to restrain him. Keanu led the villagers to the metal box, showing them the irrefutable evidence. As the box opened, the whispers of disbelief turned to cries of outrage. Together they descended to the underground room where Fiona was freed. Though weak, she managed a faint smile, grateful for Keanu's bravery and Comet's unyielding loyalty. The horse stood tall and proud, a silent hero. Father Edward's web of lies had unraveled and the truth was brought to light. Brookhaven, once a tranquil and serene village, now buzzed with tension. The townsfolk gathered in the central square, heatedly debating how to deal with the situation. Worry clouded their faces, and a heavy atmosphere hung over them. In the chaos, Father Edward, the most revered figure in the village, had become the target of their accusations. Surrounded by the villagers, his face betrayed despair and fury. Seizing a moment of distraction, Father Edward broke free. Hatred flared in his eyes as he glared at Keanu, the one who had exposed his secrets. Without hesitation, the priest lunged for a wooden plank lying on the ground. Gripping it tightly, he turned to face Keanu, his voice roaring with anger. "You don't understand. You were never meant to interfere." His words tore through the already tense air. Keanu, completely taken by surprise, stood frozen in place, unable to react. Father Edward raised the wooden beam high, preparing to strike with all the strength and pent-up hatred within him. At that critical moment, a piercing neigh shattered the eerie silence. Comet, Keanu's loyal horse, came charging in at breakneck speed. Its mane fluttered in the wind, and its eyes glowed with determination and power. With a powerful kick from its hind legs, Comet knocked the wooden beam out of Father Edward's hands, sending him staggering and tumbling to the ground. Father Edward screamed in pain, struggling to get back up. But Comet, standing tall and majestic, positioned itself between him and Keanu, blocking any attempt to advance further. A gentle breeze swept across the square, ruffling Comet's sleek coat, enhancing its imposing presence. Keanu quickly regained his composure and rushed to aid Comet. He grappled with Father Edward, while villagers began gathering closer, their eyes wide with astonishment and disbelief at the scene unfolding before them. After a tense struggle, Father Edward was finally subdued. His face bore the unmistakable expression of defeat as the villagers escorted him toward the central square. Still catching his breath after the confrontation, Keanu stood before the crowd and began to explain. He led them to the church, where the truth awaited revelation. Keanu approached the hiding spot of a secret metal box. When he opened it, the stolen coins gleamed brightly, causing the onlookers to squint in the reflected light. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Keanu guided them to a hidden room concealed behind the church wall. When the secret door swung open, every gaze turned toward Fiona, the young woman who had been missing for so long. She sat leaning against the wall, frail but unmistakably alive. The sight brought an emotional wave over the villagers. A collective sigh of relief filled the room as they realized Fiona had been saved. Comet, sensing her safety, neighed loudly as if sharing in the joy. It trotted over to Fiona, lowering its head as though to comfort her. The horse's loyal gesture moved many to tears. Father Edward, now left with no choice but to confess his crimes, was detained by the villagers to await the arrival of the police. When the officers arrived at the scene, they promptly took him into custody. The residents of Brookhaven, though still reeling from the series of events, began discussing ways to restore the trust and unity that had been shaken. Keanu decided to stay in the town, not only to help Fiona recover, but also to contribute to rebuilding the community. Comet, the heroic horse, quickly became a symbol of loyalty and bravery. The tale of Keanu, Fiona, and Comet spread like wildfire, becoming a cherished legend in the memory of Brookhaven's people. Paintings of Comet were hung in homes, and the villagers often recounted the story to their children and grandchildren, celebrating the courage of the loyal horse that saved the day. Brookhaven, after enduring such painful ordeals, began its journey toward a fresh start, prioritizing trust and transparency. What do you think of this journey? Did the bravery of Keanu and Comet move you? And what are your thoughts on Father Edward's drastic transformation? Share your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this story and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.